there, Janet Fritz here for Galaxy Girl Creations. Today I am working on a double page layout that is using one of Shamel's sketches from her new class, Start with a Sketch. And I want to say this is like maybe the first or second sketch in the series of sketches that she offers. And in her class there's like 15 sketches and she does each one of them 3 ways, so there's like 45 videos. So far it's been an awesome class and I'm really enjoying it. So I started out by cutting out one of the Paige Evans cut files for Disney, and it's the one with all the princesses. And I wanted it larger than a 12 by 12. I don't want it the complete 12 by 24, so I just took the image and put it on my in my software, and I kind of had it go off of the edge on 2 directions so that they would eventually, when I cut them out, they're going to overlap a little bit, and that's totally fine. That's what I want. And then I am using this stencil from, I think it's from Simple Stories, or it might be Echo Park. I'd have to go back and look, but actually I think it is Simple Stories. It is a Disney stencil, and it's like half of the Mickey head, and it's got a bunch of words on it. And I am putting some Nuvo Glimmer Mist through it in Tanzanite Lavender. And then I am using some watercolor from, actually it's not watercolor, it's the Shimmers Creamies Sky's the Limit, and that's the bluish color, the periwinkly color. And then I'm using some Heidi Swapp blush Color Shine, and I am watercoloring all of those princesses. And prior to that, you saw the very first thing I did was to lay down some gesso, and I ended up using some white gesso from, I think it's from Deco Art, but normally I would use a clear gesso if I'm doing the whole page, because that way I don't have to worry if the white matches the white of the page. But in this case, I knew I was doing all of the girls and it didn't have to be a full coverage on all of the page, so I used the white. And that one's a little bit thicker, so it doesn't have as much warping. But I did it on my mat, and I left it on my mat to dry, so that kind of eliminated some of the warping as well. And here you see me using my heat gun to dry and move around some of that watercolor type liquid. It's not actually watercolor, like I said, it's Color Shine and the Creamies, but it has the watercolor effect. The biggest problem is right there, I am just leaving my heat gun there and I warped my mat, and you can see there's a pink lump in the edge of it. And so I'm not sure I would recommend doing this on your mat. You can see me kind of touch it right there like, oh, I warped my mat. Luckily I have a bunch of mats and they're all pretty old, so not super worried about it, but I don't know that I would recommend using your heat gun over your mat unless you're extra careful, which I wasn't. You can see some of the water kind of pooling into the paper at the top there where the gesso did not cover. That's okay, it's not on one of the actual cuts of the girls. I know it's really hard to see the image of the girls on camera. In real life it was actually hard as well because the gesso kind of filled in all of the gaps of where the paper was cut. And you'll see when I peel it off that I kind of have to punch it out like it's a perforated image, which it wasn't perforated, it was actually cut, but that gesso kind of holds it together. Now I'm sprinkling some of the colors over just by tapping it, and I am using a little bit of the Nuvo, it's like a shimmer mist type stuff, and it has a little bit more silver in it, and it's a very similar color to the blush, but I didn't want to use that as the base color because there is so much shimmer in it, so I just wanted a little bit hint of sparkle, and so that's why I ended up using that. Now once everything is dry, I'm going to go ahead and try and pull everything off the page. That's when I realized the gesso's kind of held everything together, and it's okay. I end up pulling the entire thing off of the page and then kind of punching it out like a perforated die cut or something like that. I'm not going to make you sit through all of that, but you can see it's not super difficult to do. It just takes a little bit of wiggling things around, and it's going to come out no problem. So there's all of the girls the princesses, I'm going to put my pictures down according to the sketch that Shamel has in her class, and then I'm going to lay them across the top. Now they're not super bright, and I want them to stand out a little bit more, but I don't want them to be so bold that they detract from the photos. So I'm okay with them being light, but not quite that light. So I decided to use some ink around the edges, and the one that I am using there in the purpley color of the large pad is by Prima. It's their Color Philosophy ink called Poison Love, and it's pretty much the same color as that creamy Sky's the Limit. And then I am going to use a little bit of the pink ink, and that I end up using just some VersaFine ink that I have in two different colors. One's a little bit pink, one's a little bit peach, and so that works out really well because it kind of brings a little bit more of a boldness to the edges. I didn't go all the way in on inking those. I just went around the edges a little bit to blend it. So there's a little more definition from the paper behind. Now that paper behind is just a really old Shamel paper from, I believe, her first or second collection. I'm not really sure which one it is. Actually, I'm almost positive it's her first collection. And it is kind of a creamy color with pink polka dots. And the pink is a little bit of that peachy pink. It's not like a bubblegum pink. It's the lighter of the two colors of the back there that you see, which matches my jacket and the bow on my Eeyore inspired Mickey Mouse ears in the photo. And so these photos are actually all of me, and I don't normally scrapbook a lot of photos of myself like this on a double page layout. It's a little bit overkill in my opinion, but I want to totally document this particular day. This was the Disney Creative Day at Disneyland with Shamel, and it was the first one she's held. I'm not sure, I don't think she's had another one since as of yet. I know there were plans to do more at the other Disney parks, so maybe those are upcoming. I have no idea. I don't really keep track of it, but this to me was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity because it was close to me. I live in Northern California, and they are in Southern California, and it's not very far from me. So I thought, you know what, I've got some friends that are more like family down there. I can stay at their house and just make a trip of it. And in fact, my mom went with me down to visit the friends because they are family friends, and she stayed with them during the day while I went and did this class with Shamel. And I thought it was so much fun. We did a breakfast with Minnie Mouse, or character breakfast in the morning, and then we learned a lot of photography tips, and we learned posing tips and that kind of stuff. So it was fun. It was a day to remember, something I probably would not have done if it was, you know, in Disney World or somewhere far from me. And so I wanted to take advantage of that and go for it. This particular stamp set that I'm using is actually the stamp set that we got as being participants of that day, and so it's got this awesome castle, which I think Shamel actually sketched all of these herself, and then she shipped them to us after the fact. And so this castle, I wanted to make sure I got that on the page, and I decided to do something that I don't do very often. Oh, you can see me cutting Pocahontas' hair there. That was the point where I decided to overlap the two pieces so that they went from page to page. So with this stamp set, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with it, and I decide that I'm going to use some of this paper. It's from this little glassine bag, and that purpley, I guess, periwinkle color that is on the bag is the perfect match for the color that I have chosen to watercolor in. And they also match the fairy godmother's costume, which she is in the pictures down in the bottom and in the top photos. So, or not really top, but she's in a photo on each of the pages. So I decided to use that, and I stamp the image, the portion that I want, on the bag, and then I'm going to piece it back together on top of the original stamped image so that there's color. So I'm not coloring it in with like a Copic marker. I'm not trying to color it with watercolor and have it get all warped. I am just stamping it onto other pieces of paper, cutting it out, and then putting it back over the stamped image. And that's a fun way to kind of liven up your stamps a little, if you will, or change them up a little. And especially if you don't have access to your pens or your watercolors or whatever that you normally color with, this is a great way to go ahead and add some color to them without having to use anything but your black ink pad, some adhesive, and some scissors. So I'm going to finish doing that, and I'm not going to make you sit through the entire thing. I am going over one of the little black edges that didn't stamp perfectly. I'm just using my black Muji pen to kind of fill it in a little, if you will. Now off camera, I have used my 3-inch punch, and I've punched a circle and the scallop behind it. And I have decided that I need a little more definition on those characters. So I am going to just use my Muji pen and go around them with some ink. This is not something that I normally do, and it's not a precise or perfect thing. If I wanted that, I could have stuck a pen in my die cut machine and done that before I did any cutting or watercoloring or anything like that, but at the time I didn't know that's what I was going to want. I don't want these to be so overpowering, so I didn't use dark paper. I used white paper and went with the color watercolor effect. I want the focus to be the photos, but I do want them to have a little bit of interest up in this area that is wide open. And that was also part of the sketch that Shamel used. She did not use this die cut, she used a different die cut, but she did use a die cut in that area as well. And so I thought this was perfect just because it's Disney, I'm meeting the fairy godmother, all the princesses are there, and so I wanted to go ahead and use it. And then the words that are on it from the stenciling are stuff like fun, believe, magic. There's a whole bunch of different words, and they're just perfect for this. The color matches well. It adds a little interest, but it's not super dark. And then I decide I'm going to go ahead and put my circles down. Now the two circles, the upper right and the left hand side, are exactly where they are in the sketch pretty much. The one on the bottom part, the sketch calls for it to be over a little bit more, so it over to the right more, and it would have covered Mickey's face, and I did not want to cover Mickey's face. I purposely took that photo. The rest of the group was doing something else. I think they were all taking pictures at the casting office, kind of like I'm standing in the middle there, and people were taking their turns. But I was over a little bit down on Main Street, maybe 10, 15 feet away, and there was this poster of Mickey. And so I stood there, and it looks kind of like he's whispering in my ear or talking to me, and I didn't want to cover that up. So I moved my embellishment spot over a little bit further to the left than is called for in the sketch. Now I am stamping Magical Day out of that same stamp set that we got that day, we got for participating in that day. And that's going to be my title, and yes, it is a small title for this big 2-page spread, but I don't care. I like it. And I'm using it more as an embellishment, and you can see me filling in a couple of areas there too. I was really just too lazy to get out my stamp platform to stamp all of these images, and that's why I'm just kind of going over a couple of the areas with the pen. And so I have these little Mickey Mouse or Minnie Mouse heads and a little Mickey Mouse head. I also got those from Shamel. They came with the stamps. I think she gave everybody a little bit of a couple of little ephemera pieces or 3x4 cards that were Disney related. And so those were in my package, and so I decided to use them on this layout because it has that vintage kind of looking Minnie, and it's got the cream color base which matches, and so that worked out perfect. Now I decided to go and add a little bit of that color shine to the title that I had stamped, but because I went over it with the ink, it smeared. So I had to go back and stamp it on this white piece of paper, or actually I watercolored on this white piece of paper with that same Heidi Swapp color shine, and then waited for it to dry and stamped it again and recut it out. So the problem was that was a lot of white up in that corner, and this layout primarily has cream. Typically I don't mind mixing the two, but then I like to have both in a lot of areas. And with that being one of the few white pieces, I didn't feel like it matched very well. I added a little piece of ribbon across this bottom circle. And then to tie in the sketching around the girls, I sketched around each of the big punched circles, kind of playing around with what I'm going to do. I'm not really sure at this point. I kind of go back and forth. I play with the wood veneers, and I just really wasn't sure and really wasn't sold on any one thing. And then I had these pieces that were from a chipboard set of princess die cuts. They were chipboard pieces of the Disney princesses, probably from EK Success or something like that. And they had florals and hearts in them. And so I decided to put a flower in each of the two spots towards the top, and a heart at the bottom one. I almost decided to put that crown on top of Minnie, but then it would block out her hat with the flower in it, so I decided not to use that. And then I decided to put a little wooden heart in each of those areas. Then I'll add some sequins and finish up my journaling, and that's pretty much going to do it. I will leave a link down to Shamel's website in case you're interested in her class. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Have a great day.